Everyone has a villain in their story. The coworker who took credit, the partner who never listened, the friend who always made everything about them. You know their exact flaws in detail because you have narrated them in your own head many times. Here is the question almost no one asks while narrating. In someone else's version of this same story, who is the villain? This is not a comfortable place to start, and it is not meant to erase whatever was actually done to you. But there is a specific, uncomfortable category of behaviour worth naming honestly. The kind that does not feel like harm from the inside, because it wears the costume of being reasonable, or tired, or simply honest. Carl Jung spent much of his career studying this exact blind spot. He observed that the shadow, the part of ourselves we cannot tolerate seeing, is rarely violent or dramatic. It is usually small, ordinary, and fully convinced of its own good intentions. Today, we are looking at 7 quiet signs that the difficult person in someone else's story might, in certain moments, be you. Not as an accusation, but as the kind of honest inventory almost no one takes until something forces them to. The first sign rarely announces itself directly. It shows up as a pattern of being right, not occasionally. The way anyone is right sometimes, but almost constantly, in nearly every disagreement, across nearly every relationship. If the common denominator in every conflict you can remember is that the other person eventually turned out to be unreasonable, difficult, or wrong, it is worth sitting with an uncomfortable possibility. Either you have had remarkably poor luck with people, or you are the fixed variable, and everyone else is the constant that keeps failing the same test. The second sign lives in how apologies get delivered. There is a specific kind of sentence that sounds like an apology, but functions as an accusation. I'm sorry you feel that way. I'm sorry if that upset you. Notice what disappeared from those sentences. The actual action, the actual choice, replaced by the other person's reaction, as though their feelings were the strange, disproportionate variable, rather than anything that was actually done. Donald Winnicott's work on early development suggests this pattern often begins in childhood homes, where taking real responsibility was never modelled, only performed. The third sign is a specific kind of exhaustion in the people closest to you. Not dramatic conflict, just a slow, quiet withdrawal that is easy to misread as them changing, getting busier, growing apart. Karen Horney described how people who cannot tolerate their own perceived flaws often unconsciously demand a great deal of accommodation from others without ever naming the demand directly. The people around them adjust again and again until adjusting becomes its own kind of exhaustion, and they start pulling back, not because anything dramatic happened, but because the cost of staying close quietly outgrew what the relationship gave them in return. There is a particular version of this worth noticing closely. The friend who used to text back within the hour, now taking days. The family member who used to call, now waiting to be called. None of these individually proves anything. People get busy, life changes. But when the pattern repeats across multiple relationships, at roughly the same point in each one, it stops looking like coincidence and starts looking like a slow, unconscious verdict being delivered by people who never said a word about why. The fourth sign is the speed and heat of your own defensiveness. Genuine misunderstandings tend to produce curiosity. Wait, that's not what I meant. Let me explain. But a specific kind of defensiveness produces something else entirely. An immediate, disproportionate need to be cleared, to win the exchange, to make the other person take it back, even when the criticism was small and offered gently. Sigmund Freud's early work on defense mechanisms described this precisely. The intensity of a defense is rarely proportional to the size of the accusation. It is proportional to how close the accusation lands to something the person cannot bear to consider true about themselves. The fifth sign hides inside your own generosity, which sounds like the opposite of a warning sign, but often isn't. Many people who cause quiet harm are not cruel. They are, in fact, remarkably giving, attentive, thoughtful, quick to help. The catch is what happens when that giving goes unacknowledged or unreturned in the specific way and timeline they expected. Nathaniel Branden's work on self-esteem points to something relevant here. Generosity offered as a transaction, even an unconscious one, tends to curdle into resentment the moment it isn't repaid on schedule. And that resentment often gets expressed sideways, through coldness, through subtly punishing withdrawal, rather than through an honest conversation about what was actually wanted. This is part of what makes this particular sign so difficult to catch in yourself. The generosity is real, the help genuinely helped. What goes unexamined is the invisible ledger running quietly underneath it. A private tally of who owes what, activated the moment reciprocity doesn't arrive in the exact shape it was expected to take. The people on the receiving end rarely know the ledger exists. They just notice eventually that warmth has cooled for reasons they were never given. The sixth sign is a specific kind of humour. The joke that is technically a joke, delivered with a smile, that nonetheless leaves a small precise mark on whoever it was aimed at. When called out, the joke gets defended immediately. I was just kidding. You're too sensitive. Bessel van der Kolk's research into how the body registers emotional injury offers a useful distinction here. The target's body does not know the difference between a joke and an insult delivered with the same tone and timing. If the same comment reliably produces a wince, a pause, a slightly too quick laugh from the same people, the label of joke is doing a lot of protective work for whoever keeps making it. The seventh sign is the hardest to see because it is the quietest. A consistent gap between the version of events you remember and the version everyone else in the room remembers. Not lying exactly. Something closer to a memory that has been unconsciously, repeatedly edited in your own favour, smoothing your roll down and sharpening everyone else's. Marcus Aurelius warned against exactly this kind of self-flattering distortion, insisting that a person who cannot examine their own conduct honestly will always find external explanations first. This particular sign often surfaces during arguments about the past. Two people recalling the same conversation from months earlier, one remembering a request, the other remembering an accusation, both entirely convinced of their own version. Memory is not a recording. It is a reconstruction, rebuilt slightly differently each time it is retrieved. And that reconstruction tends to quietly favour whoever is doing the remembering. This is not conscious dishonesty. It is simply what an unexamined mind does by default, left to its own devices without anyone checking its work. None of these seven signs on their own means very much. Everyone is defensive occasionally. Everyone makes a joke that lands wrong sometimes. What matters is the pattern. Whether these are rare exceptions in an otherwise self-aware life, or a consistent architecture holding up a story where you are mysteriously always the reasonable one. There is often a specific quiet moment when one of these 7 signs stops being abstract and becomes personal. A particular face surfacing in memory, a particular apology that was never quite an apology, a particular joke that landed a little too well to have been an accident. Jung believed that recognizing the shadow was not a moment of self-condemnation, but the beginning of something closer to freedom. He wrote that we are not disturbed by things, but by the views we take of things. And the view most people take of themselves is curated so carefully, so protectively, that entire rooms of their own behaviour are never examined at all. Seeing even one of these 7 signs clearly in yourself is not evidence that you are a bad person. It is evidence that you are finally willing to look at a mirror you have been avoiding. This channel exists to sit with exactly this kind of quiet, uncomfortable self-examination. The patterns that shape a life from underneath without ever announcing themselves by name. If that is the kind of exploration you are drawn to, consider staying. There is no simple fix offered here, no 5-step plan to become a different person by tomorrow. But there is a question worth carrying forward the next time a relationship ends, or a friend pulls away, or a conflict resolves in your favour a little too easily. Which version of the story would the other person tell? If this reached something in you, say so in the comments. Specifically, if you're willing. Which of these 7 signs was the hardest one to sit with? And if you know someone who has never once considered they might be the difficult one in someone else's story, this might be the first time anyone has ever handed them that mirror gently.